Have you ever wondered what it's like to live in a haunted house? Imagine moving into a new home, only to discover it's filled with dark entities and terrifying experiences. In this video, I'll share the chilling true story of my family's encounter with the supernatural, from the faceless woman dripping black blood to the constant feeling of being watched. What would you do if you saw a ghostly figure standing in your hallway? How would you cope with unexplained noises and shadows lurking in every corner? Stay with me as I recount every spine-tingling detail of our haunting, the fear that followed us, and the questions that still remain unanswered. If you're captivated by real-life horror stories and the paranormal, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss another terrifying tale. Let's dive into this eerie experience together. When I was 14, my family moved into a new house. I'm 16 now, and those memories still haunt me. My sister, who's 2 years younger than me, was especially excited about the move. We thought it would be a fresh start, a chance for new adventures in a new place. The house was big and old, with creaky floors and high ceilings. It had a lot of character, as my mom liked to say. At first, we were all thrilled. My sister and I ran from room to room, exploring every corner and imagining all the fun we would have. The excitement was almost tangible. But as we settled in, we started hearing things about the house's history. A neighbor casually mentioned that a child had died there years ago. We didn't pay much attention at first, thinking it was just a spooky story to scare the new kids in town. But then my stepfather shared something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Before we moved in, he had been painting the house. One evening, while he was working alone, the lights suddenly went out. He thought it was just a power outage, but when he checked, everything else seemed fine. He never found an explanation for it, and it left him feeling uneasy. As time went on, we couldn't ignore the strange vibe the house had. There was always a sense of something watching us, something not quite right. The excitement we initially felt began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of unease. My sister was the first to experience something truly terrifying. She came to me one night, pale and shaking, saying she had seen a girl in a white dress following her. At first, I thought she was making it up or had just had a bad dream. But the fear in her eyes was real. She described the girl in detail: long hair, no face, and covered in what looked like black blood. Her fingers were long and sharp, and when my sister got scared, the woman's head opened up, spilling blood and other horrifying things. It sounded like something out of a nightmare, but my sister was convinced it was real. I tried to comfort her, telling her it was probably just her imagination. But deep down, I felt a chill. The house already felt strange, and my sister's story only added to the growing fear. We decided not to tell our parents, hoping it was a one-time thing and that it would go away. The days went by, and we tried to go back to normal. But there was always a lingering sense of dread. The house felt heavy, like it was filled with a dark presence. We heard strange noises at night, footsteps in the hall, whispers we couldn't quite make out. Then one evening, my sister pointed out the woman to me. She was standing behind me, she said. My heart pounded as I turned around, but I saw nothing. However, our dog Max reacted immediately. He started barking furiously and backing away, clearly scared. That was when I knew something was very wrong. Our parents noticed the changes in us. We were jumpy, on edge, and not sleeping well. They tried to reassure us, saying it was just the stress of moving and getting used to a new place. But we knew it was more than that. The house had a dark secret, and it was starting to reveal itself. We couldn't escape the feeling that we were being watched. Every shadow seemed sinister, every creak of the floor made us jump. The initial excitement of the move had turned into a nightmare. The house, which was supposed to be our new home, had become a place of fear. The first time my sister saw the girl in the white dress was on a chilly evening, a few weeks after we had moved in. We were in our rooms, doing homework, when I heard her scream. I rushed to her room and found her standing in the middle, pale as a ghost, her eyes wide with terror. She pointed towards the window, her hand shaking. There was a girl right there, outside the window, as she said, her voice trembling. I looked, but there was nothing there. The yard was empty, the only movement coming from the swaying trees in the wind. She described the girl in detail. She was wearing a white dress, her hair long and dark, covering most of her face. My sister said she had been standing still, staring at her through the window. At first, she thought it was someone playing a prank, but then she noticed something strange. As she watched, the girl's face began to change. Her features melted away, leaving a blank, smooth surface where her face should have been. My sister's fear grew as she saw what looked like black blood oozing from the girl's head, dripping down her dress. The girl's fingers were long and thin, almost claw-like, and they too were covered in the same black, sticky substance. My sister was frozen in place, unable to move or scream. The girl raised one of her hands and pointed directly at her, and that's when my sister finally found the strength to scream. Her scream seemed to break the spell. The girl disappeared as suddenly as she had appeared, leaving my sister standing there, shaking and crying. I tried to comfort her, telling her it was just her imagination, but deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. The fear in her eyes was real. She was genuinely terrified, and it wasn't something that could be easily dismissed. We decided to keep it to ourselves, not wanting to worry our parents or make things worse. But the incident left a mark on both of us. My sister became more withdrawn, scared to be alone, and jumpy at every little sound. The memory of the faceless girl haunted her, and she started having nightmares about the woman with the long fingers and the black blood. It was as if the girl had left a dark shadow over her mind. The house felt different after that night. The air seemed heavier, the shadows darker. We tried to go back to our routines, but there was always a sense of unease lingering in the background. Every creak, every rustle, made us jump. I started to watch my sister more closely, worried about her. She would often stare off into space, as if she was seeing something I couldn't. The fear in her eyes hadn't gone away, and it scared me to see her like that. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know how to help her. We were both on edge, always expecting something to happen. The house, which had seemed so exciting at first, had become a place of fear and uncertainty. The faceless girl in the white dress was just the beginning of our nightmare. A few days after the first encounter, my sister and I were in the living room watching TV. It was late, and the house was quiet. We were trying to distract ourselves from the strange occurrences by watching something funny. Suddenly, my sister's face went pale, and she pointed towards the hallway. "She's back," she whispered, her voice trembling. I followed her gaze, but at first, I saw nothing. I was about to tell her it was just her imagination when Max, our dog, started barking furiously. He stood in front of us, his eyes fixed on the hallway, his fur standing on end. My heart started to race. Max was normally a calm dog, and seeing him so agitated made my stomach churn with fear. I looked back at my sister. She was frozen in place, tears streaming down her face. "She's right there," as she said, her voice barely audible. "Behind you." I turned slowly, my breath catching in my throat. At first, I saw nothing but shadows. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement. A tall, faceless woman, covered in black blood, was standing in the hallway, her long fingers reaching towards us. Panic surged through me. I grabbed my sister's hand and pulled her close. Max continued to bark, backing away slowly, his eyes never leaving the figure. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and my mind was racing with fear and confusion. This couldn't be real, but it was happening right in front of me. We stood there, paralyzed with fear, as the figure slowly began to move. Her head tilted to the side, and black blood dripped from her fingertips. My sister was sobbing uncontrollably, and I felt completely helpless. I didn't know what to do. After what felt like an eternity, the figure vanished as suddenly as she had appeared. The hallway was empty again, but the fear lingered. Max stopped barking but remained tense, his eyes darting around the room. I hugged my sister tightly, trying to calm her down, but I was just as scared as she was. We didn't sleep that night. Every little noise made us jump, and the memory of the faceless woman haunted us. I kept telling myself it was just a bad dream, but deep down, I knew it was real. The house felt different now, darker and more menacing. Strange things started happening more frequently. We heard footsteps in the middle of the night, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere, and objects moving on their own. The air was always thick with tension, and we never felt truly alone. My initial disbelief slowly turned into fear. I couldn't deny what was happening anymore. The house was haunted, and we were trapped in it. My sister and I clung to each other, trying to find some comfort in our shared fear, but it was hard. Even our parents started to notice the changes. They tried to reassure us, saying it was just our imaginations, but they couldn't explain the strange occurrences. The oppressive feeling in the house was undeniable, and it was affecting all of us. I knew we had to do something, but I didn't know what. The fear was growing stronger every day, and I felt powerless against it. The faceless woman and the strange happenings were taking over our lives, and there seemed to be no escape. The house that was supposed to be our home had become a place of nightmares. After those terrifying encounters, the atmosphere in our house changed completely. It felt heavy and oppressive, like there was a dark cloud hanging over everything. The air seemed thicker, harder to breathe, and the house always felt cold, no matter how high we turned up the heat. I started seeing things that shouldn't be there. One night, I was in my room when I saw small pale feet standing just outside my door. They looked like they belonged to a child. My heart raced as I approached the door, but when I opened it, there was no one there. The feet had vanished. It wasn't just me. My sister saw things too. She would come to me trembling, saying she saw white and black hands reaching out from the shadows. Sometimes they were small, like a child's hands, other times they were long and bony, almost skeletal. It was terrifying. At night, the house was filled with strange noises. We heard footsteps echoing down the halls, even though no one was there. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I would wake up to the sound of breathing right next to my bed. It was slow and raspy, but when I turned on the light, there was nothing. Things in the house started to move on their own. We would find chairs pushed out from the table, doors left open, and objects that had been moved from their usual places. Once, I found a photo frame lying broken on the floor, even though it had been securely on the shelf just moments before. These occurrences left me feeling constantly on edge. I could never relax, always waiting for the next strange thing to happen. My sense of safety and well-being was shattered. The house that was supposed to be our home had become a place of fear and anxiety. I began to dread coming home from school. Walking through the front door felt like stepping into a nightmare. My sister and I started spending more time outside, trying to escape the oppressive feeling inside. But no matter where we went, the fear followed us. Even Max, our dog, was affected. He would growl at empty spaces and refuse to go into certain rooms. His behavior only added to our fear. If he was scared, then we knew we had a reason to be scared too. His instincts told him something was wrong, and we couldn't ignore that. My parents tried to reassure us, but they couldn't deny that things were happening. They started leaving lights on at night and checking the house more often, but it didn't help. The oppressive feeling was always there, a constant reminder that we weren't alone. The stress of living in that house started to take a toll on all of us. We were always tired, jumpy, and irritable. It was hard to concentrate on school or work when our minds were always on edge, waiting for the next strange occurrence. Our home had become a prison. I tried to find logical explanations for what was happening, but I couldn't. The things we were experiencing were beyond reason, beyond anything I could understand. The fear was growing stronger every day, and there seemed to be no escape. The worst part was the feeling of being watched. No matter where I was in the house, I felt eyes on me. It was an intense, unsettling sensation that made my skin crawl. I knew we had to do something, but I didn't know what. The house that was supposed to be our refuge had become a place of nightmares, and I was terrified of what might happen next. One night, everything came to a head. It was late, and my sister and I were trying to get some sleep. The house was eerily quiet, but we had learned that this kind of silence was often a precursor to something terrifying. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to relax. Suddenly, I heard a faint tapping sound, like someone lightly knocking on the walls. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just the house settling. But the tapping grew louder and more insistent. It seemed to be coming from all around me, echoing through the walls and floor. I sat up in bed, my heart racing. My sister came into my room, her face pale with fear. Do you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded, too scared to speak. We stood there, frozen, as the tapping turned into a loud rhythmic pounding. It sounded like it was coming from everywhere at once. Max started barking furiously, and then suddenly, he stopped. The silence that followed was even more terrifying. We heard heavy footsteps coming down the hallway, slow and deliberate. The floorboards creaked under the weight of whoever or whatever was out there. I grabbed my sister's hand, and we backed up against the wall, our eyes fixed on the doorway. The footsteps stopped right outside my room. For a moment, everything was still. Then, the door slowly creaked open, revealing the dark hallway beyond. A figure stood there, tall and menacing. It was the Faceless woman, her long fingers dripping with black blood. Her head was tilted to the side, and she seemed to be staring right at us, even though she had no eyes. My sister screamed, and I felt a wave of terror wash over me. The woman stepped into the room, her movements slow and deliberate. The air grew cold, and I could see my breath in front of me. I tried to move, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. The sense of helplessness was overwhelming. Max growled and barked, but the woman paid him no attention. She raised one of her long claw-like fingers and pointed directly at us. Black blood dripped onto the floor, spreading in a dark, oily pool. The sight of it made my stomach churn. My sister clung to me, sobbing uncontrollably. I wanted to protect her, to do something, but I felt completely powerless. The woman took another step forward, and I could feel the oppressive weight of her presence bearing down on us. Then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she vanished. The room was empty again, but the sense of dread remained. We stood there, trembling, trying to process what had just happened. The fear was so intense, it felt like a physical weight pressing down on us. We spent the rest of the night huddled together, too scared to sleep. Every little sound made us jump, and the memory of the Faceless woman haunted our thoughts. It was the most terrifying night of our lives, and it left us feeling more helpless and vulnerable than ever before. The next morning, we told our parents what had happened. They listened, their faces pale with worry. They couldn't deny the fear in our eyes or the terror in our voices. They knew something was very wrong, but they didn't know how to fix it. The sense of helplessness was overwhelming for all of us. Even now, years later, the fear hasn't left us. The memories of those nights in the house still haunt me and my sister. We moved out eventually, but the questions and the fear followed us. We never got any answers about what we experienced. Why was the house haunted? Who was the Faceless woman, and why did she torment us? Every time I think about it, I feel a chill run down my spine. The black blood, the eerie tapping, the sense of being watched, it all comes rushing back. My sister and I have tried to make sense of it, but there are no clear explanations. We've read about other hauntings, but nothing matches what we went through. The impact on our lives has been profound. We're both more cautious now, always on edge. I can't sleep without a nightlight, and my sister keeps her bedroom door locked every night. We jump at the slightest noise, our minds immediately going back to those terrifying nights. Even our parents were affected. They tried to stay strong for us, but I could see the fear in their eyes. They never talked much about it, but I know they felt just as helpless as we did. Moving out of that house was a relief, but it didn't erase the memories or the fear. Sometimes I wonder if it was all just a bad dream, but then I remember the details, the dripping black blood, the faceless woman's long fingers, the cold, oppressive air. It was all too real. We didn't just imagine it. We lived through it. There are times when I try to talk about it with my sister, but she gets too upset. It's like she wants to forget, but she can't. The fear is still there, just beneath the surface. We both carry it with us, a constant reminder of what happened in that house. I've tried to research the history of the house, looking for any clues that might explain the hauntings. I found some information about the child who died there, but nothing that explained the faceless woman or the black blood. The mystery remains unsolved. Sometimes, I think about going back to the house, just to see if it's still the same. But the thought of stepping inside again fills me with dread. I don't know if I could face those memories, or if I'd find something even worse waiting for me. The lingering questions and unresolved fear are something we've learned to live with. It's like a dark shadow that follows us wherever we go. We've had to find ways to cope, but it's always there, in the back of our minds. I don't know if we'll ever find out what truly happened in that house or why those entities haunted us. The mystery may never be solved, and we might have to live with the fear and the questions forever. But one thing is certain, those experiences have changed us, and the memories will never fade. As much as I want to move on, the past keeps pulling me back. I keep hoping that someday, we'll find the answers we're looking for. Until then, all we can do is try to live our lives, despite the fear that still lingers from our time in that haunted house.